Good evening and welcome to Biz in Focus. I'm Zeenat Musafir. Joining us this evening is the inaugural Vice Chancellor of the University of Uvavellasa, Dr. Chandra Ambudeniya. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Zeenat.
So, Doctor, in a few more months we'll be coming to 2020, and with the new year comes a new budget. So, this year for the budget, what are the areas do you think the government should focus in terms of education in Sri Lanka?
It's the total allocation for education in the budget, which has been about 10% of the total expenditure in our country. And when you look at why we have a budget, is because we want to make a contribution to the GDP, and it's only about 1.9% of our GDP. But when you look at the 10% allocation from the total expenditure, it is a considerable amount of money. Actually, you know, it's about 2,800 million rupees. It's a big amount of money for us. Now, as you go down the line, the allocation on higher education, for example, from the total education budget is about 26% for higher education, right? And that is about 70 billion rupees, more than 70 billion. Now, this is what happened last year, I'm telling you, you know, and then, of course, when it goes to the coming year, I have a strong feeling that from the policy that has been spoken a number of times by the President, I see that his expectation is like giving a much broader opportunity and also access to a lot of people who are getting into the post A-level era, and also up to post A-level to improve on the quality and the opportunities that the students get to learn targeting a job.
Doctor, now in terms of allocation to the education sector, a recent study conducted by the World Bank said that Sri Lanka is right now an upper middle income country. So when compared with other upper middle income countries, the allocation made to the education sector is not exactly on par. What is your take on that?
You see, different countries have different conditions of economy. Now, we are an island nation, and we are a very resource rich country, and the way we have been given education is to suit the factory model that prevailed in about 200 years ago. I mean, basically during the Industrial Revolution, they gave us the education system that was based on the Oxbridge model that we got used to, and we continue to use that, which was catering to the colonial needs. Now, it's a time for us to break away from the colonial style economy, where we were feeding the Western countries with raw materials, and we are now having to revolutionize our education, which we have not been able to do over the last 70 years. Of course, you know, Mr. Kannangara was a great person to have given us the free education, but that model served a purpose during that time. But now it's a different time that we need to really restructure our education. I can explain that much more in detail as we discuss this issue. So, if we try to compare the 6% allocation that most people are talking about, is not true. For example, Japan is allocating only about 3% or even less than that. You see, and they are very rich in, for example, their technology development. They are technology developers for the world. So a number of other countries who are really best in their technological development, which is the real highest achievement in economic development now. In our country, we need to really choose the right learning platforms, right type of education to suit our country's knowledge to cater to the economic development of the country that will arise in the next 5, 10 years or even beyond that, because what we are training at the primary level is for about another 15 years. Secondary level is about another 10 years. Then when you go to post-secondary education, it's for the next like 5 years. You see. So basically we need to restructure the education with that purpose in mind. The target must be there. Now, what has not happened in our country is that we have been using the same thing that we learned about 70 years ago without any questioning why we are doing what we are doing. Everything in silos. Now, today that silo thinking should be done away with. It should be really integrated knowledge that we should be using in our learning processes as well. My greatest concern is what happens to this, say for example, in expenditure on university education is like 22% of the total education budget. How are we getting the real value for that expenditure, which is about more than 60 billion rupees? Then you can see that in terms of provincial education, that is what the provincial council spending, we have about 130 billion money distributed in the country. And is that really being used properly? That is for primary and secondary education. Then also you can think about the increase in the total education budget, which is about 10% of the total government expenditure. That means for everything else we have only 90% of our total expenditure that we can raise money from.
Doctor, so in terms of school curriculum, do you think our curriculum is outdated?
Absolutely.
Do you think we have too many exams and we don't touch the practical aspect of the subjects as much as we should?
You touched on the very real point. That is, one of the things that we have not changed is our testing methods. Testing means what I call is the assessment method. The assessments in our country are really, you let the students learn something, memorize it, and you test their memory. Now, we need to really understand it's not regurgitating something that you have memorized that really makes you a competent person to work in the modern world. There are lots of other different things that we need to really add to that knowledge. So, our learning system must change to give the experience to the students to encompass all those other parameters that we should build into the learning process. I mean, I can explain them in very detail, but the concept is that we need to break away from this, that term-end testing, year-end testing, giving 100% weight to that testing to find out whether the student is really a competent person. Now, this happens not only in the school system, but also in the higher education, university education system. What I'm sometimes largely in the vocational education also, only a very small amount goes into the experience side, the development of skills side that is taken into consideration. So, our real challenge is how to have this new machine which will give access to 100% of the students who get qualified in our learning ladder, starting from the say for example O-levels, right? O-levels and 100% of the students, whether they want to continue with A-levels or whether they want to get into some education process. How do we make provisions for that? Then you go to A-level, and how those who get through the A-levels, how do we make provisions for 100% of those A-level qualified people to do what they aspire to do? Give them the opportunity to learn what they aspire to learn. Today I find that that hope and their aspiration cannot be met with the resources that we have in the marketplace. So that's a real challenge before the government. Of course, there are so many things that we can contribute to help develop the modern education system, but these are the real challenges. So I would think breaking away from the silo-based education, bringing the experiential learning model into the system, and preparing proper assessment methods to judge whether the students are really getting qualified with knowledge as well as experience in the learning process, with the skills, right attitudes as well. And then coming to higher levels, how do we really give 100% opportunities to our students who are qualifying to engage with whatever they choose to learn? Because today youth are different to the days when we were young. Today they are exposed to what is happening outside the world because of the free access they have to the internet. I mean, they may not have traveled overseas, but from here they can see what is happening overseas. So with that, we must really give them the opportunity also to add to their knowledge using that wide opportunity they have in access to the worldwide knowledge. Today, people don't learn from books. They learn from the internet. So that is that is our advantage really, and we are also very strong in our country with internet access now, and almost I think at 40% of our country has internet access, but almost every student going up the learning ladder have had experience on the internet. But giving tabs and things like that to students, I don't think it is really a wise thing to do, but because that that is like giving uncontrolled access to a very dangerous weapon. You don't allow a child to use a gun. Today you need to learn how to get the student to use the tool they have in their hand for the purpose that it is intended to work for them, for their benefit. Yes. So how do you really do that? That's another thing. But definitely internet-based learning is one of the things that we really need to look at in the digital era, because this is the digital era. So transformation from the classroom to a digital learning economy is one of the most important things.
Talking about higher education, we were talking about the labor market. Now, there is a mismatch between the demands of the labor market as well as the supply, that is in terms of the students and the education field that they choose to go forward with. Now, how could we reduce this mismatch or minimize this mismatch?
Very pertinent when we look at what the students learn at the exit point in the school as well as at the exit point at the university. Now, universities did a market survey of students who have graduated, and then 2 years back, 2017, and they found that the situation is very unsatisfactory. And they have identified individually for each university the employability of what they have learned. And at the school level, what they get as a job when they leave the school is also very hard for them to find what they really are wanting to. There are very few fortunate people who, because of their personal contacts and their social status, who get into jobs. But the large majority of our children in the suburban areas, in rural areas, they find it extremely difficult I have seen it myself because I have been working with rural people very closely for many years, and sometimes they get to learn something in the vocational institutes in the rural areas, but they don't have those jobs in those rural areas, and they go and find a job to match that learning. So those are big problems. When it comes to university education, it's a dead loss, I must tell you. The dead loss means, that is what I said, what happens to that money we spend on students at the higher education level. Only if we have an education system that doesn't make a student capable of taking up a job and confidently handling it, then that education system has failed. There is no place in the world where there is 100% that gives 100% capability to a student to know exactly what the job should be about. But the student is able to find that out very rapidly because he has got the instinct, got the right exploratory know-how to ask the right questions from the right places, like from the internet and the people above them and the colleagues, peers, and get the knowledge how to do it properly to get the thing. Now, that kind of capability is not there. And also, they have the wrong expectations. Now, one of the things I have found personally from my experience, not only from the Uvalasa University, but from outside other universities, a lot of students who are in touch with me, that you see, they expect to get a job, a desk-bound job, and also a high salary. It doesn't happen. And not only that, they get a job in the private sector. Within a month or two after their second salary, they are looking at other opportunities in the market, thinking that they can go up the ladder. And they find those jobs boring because these are repetitive jobs, and the companies are expecting them to do the work. Now, the patience with our students is not there who are graduating from the universities. The right attitude is not there, and they want to leave that. And what happens? The moment the government is doing a survey, they will come as unemployed or underemployed people. They are counted as that. This is also another problem with our government. What the government does is, government takes all of these people and then try to solve the unemployment problem by creating non-existent jobs in the market. Particularly, they try to find them teaching appointments or appointments as management assistants or something like that in the public service. So, our entire government machinery has become totally unproductive now with the influx of huge volume of unproductive staff. Now, if you are looking at economic growth, there are only two things that we need to worry about the economy. One is the growth aspect, second is the productivity aspect. Now, how can you grow an economy when you are really overloading it with dead weight?
Yes. Doctor, so talking about teachers and resources and infrastructure for education, there is an unequal distribution of resources across schools or universities across the country.
Government creates teaching vacancies and then solve the unemployment problem in our country by appointing thousands of teachers.
Yes.
And to get the job, they have to go after a politician and get into their list and get recommended for the interview, and then they get selected. And that's how most of the time the system has worked, particularly in the provincial system and also even in the central government. Now, these teachers who get the appointments, what they do afterwards is that they find after say 6 months, 7 months, they ask for a transfer to a much more comfortable location. So, the better schools get richer with people who are qualified, and then the rural schools are left out. But I don't agree that we are short of teachers.
Yes. So, doctor, how do we solve this issue, the unequal distribution of resources in terms of teachers or infrastructure?
You got to have a no-nonsense approach. Obviously, the executive must put a foot down and say, here I give you a job, this is what you are getting, do it or get out. After that, the government doesn't hold any responsibility on the person to find a job. And that track record of that person also must be carried in the inventory of people in our country, because we don't have a performance assessment system in our country for individuals. Now, I mean, even in a government department, the performance assessments are done very haphazardly, on ad hoc basis, on the whims and fancies of individuals. But here is a situation where every person who seeks a government job based on a certain premise that he is going to commit himself to a teaching appointment, and once you get that job, you got to carry on with that job. If he quits that job, then it is up to him to find his next job, not the responsibility of the government. He can't be listed as an unemployed person. They should be taken out. They should go and either learn something else and get into a job. And there is a reluctance for people also to continuously improve on their learning something different. Some people fail something and that they think their entire story ends there. It's not like that. They should be ready to find other opportunities to learn and then keep on learning. So these are all in the bigger picture for our country to develop our learning. So, and also I must say, majority of our teachers are females. Yes. And also in the university system, majority are females. So now, those days, females used to tell, we are not given an equal opportunity. I'm telling, take the opportunity that you have, you see, and start working. Of course, I have a challenge to our companies to employ more from the female workforce. Yes. And that's a terrible problem that our private sector has. So we need to really challenge the private sector. Yes. Start recruiting our learned people, females, into the factories, into the plantations, and into I think banks of course have an equal opportunity, but the general reluctance to take females should stop.
Thank you, Doctor, and that's a wrap of Biz in Focus. Joining us this evening was the inaugural Vice Chancellor of the University of Uvavalasa, Dr. Chandra Ambudeniya. Doctor, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and thank you for watching News First. Good night.